everyone. I'm Rory McGuire. I'm a professor and extension specialist at Virginia Tech, and I am for the soil because the soil is our future. We don't make any more of it. If you eat, you rely on soil.
Welcome again, everyone, to the For the Soil podcast, A Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Joining me, my co-host, are Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition and Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. We have a returning guest, and guys, I've got a lot of questions. Eric, would you reintroduce our special guest?
Yes, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Buzz Kloot with us from the University of South Carolina and the Arnold School of Public Health. And Buzz has done a lot of both research as well as video production around soil health. And with that, Buzz, I'd like to ask you, how does soil health and science really fit into public health?
Well, I think part of that, Eric, is that I just happen to have done my PhD in aquatic sciences in public health. And when I had my quote unquote conversion with Ray Archuleta, you'll have heard that in the first episode, I found an academic home in the School of Public Health because my advisor was the graduate director here. And because we are on 100% extramurally funded salary, in other words, I have to get all of my salary through contracts and grants. They welcomed me in. What's not to like with the indirect cost, right? So, so as I shifted from aquatic sciences to soil sciences, what I realized was that soil science is an environmental, or at least soils and healthy soils are an environmental health issue. So if we can attend to healthy soils, make soils healthier, means our plants and animals are healthier, means healthier human health, better human health. In the same way, when we're talking about some of the externalities of some of the farming practices we have, we think about Dust Bowl issues, not only from 1932, but you can go have a look at what happened in Illinois this year, some of the dust that happened. So not only, are you getting airborne dust and then the environmental stuff, but we had a number of people killed in traffic accidents. So again, a public health issue. And then the other part of it is, of course, erosion. If we're eroding soils into rivers and streams, especially when we've got a lot of particulate matter, that's going to be phosphorus pollution. And then, of course, when we are applying too much nitrogen, we have our water bodies below ground. Our aquifers are then contaminated with nitrates. So in some parts of the Midwest where we have a lot of nitrate contamination, pregnant women, for instance, can't drink the water because it's above 10 parts per million, and that subjects babies to what we call blue baby syndrome. So when you're talking about the whole thing of soil health, cutting back on inputs, working with Mother Nature rather than against Mother Nature, creating healthy soils, healthy crops, healthy animals, that leads to healthy humans. So I think it's very logical. And we had a little coup a couple of years ago. We, quote unquote, stole a soil scientist from Oklahoma State University. And her name is Dr. Andrea Yilling. And she's actually a real soil scientist, and she works on the same floor as I do. And she specifically has an interest in particulate organic matter, from large to small organic matter, small sizes of organic matter. And she's particularly interested in carbon to nitrogen ratios. And in fact, she has been hired by the USDA Soil Science Division to look at dynamic properties in South Carolina. And we feel that that kind of really fits in well with the whole idea of of public health. So I know that soil science is often sort of parallel to agronomic sciences, but we feel at USC, where, we have no agricultural department, it fits as well. And I think something else that may also fit is that we don't have buildings named after large agrochemical companies on our campus. So it means that we have a little bit more freedom to speak about some of these things than academics may have in other universities. It's not to say that they're corrupt, but sometimes they have to be very cautious about what they say, especially where their funding comes from. So we like to think that we provide a necessary complement to our brethren in the land-grant universities. And having said that, it's amazing to see our brethren and sisters up the road at Clemson University really embracing soil health. And it's really gratifying to see that over the last 15 years. We've got lots of students graduating, and they're crazy about soil health.
And Buzz, a lot of what you talked about is this kind of, I guess, this systems thinking, which obviously you have that approach. But it's pretty easy in our society today, in our culture, to be siloed. That you're the sector that you're in, and not thinking outside of that. But we know that soil health, and so many environmental, social, cultural issues cross these silos and these borders. And you're doing that in your work just by the nature, like you talked about, of the landscape that you're working in. Do you see that paradigm shift, that movement towards more of a systems thinking, or is there still a lot of need to move in that direction?
I think there's a lot of need to move in that direction. For instance, I'd still feel somewhat inadequate in that sense. And I think I've been able to see things from the point of view of the farmer and the rancher and the soil and the environment. The thing that we have not gone through is how do we change our food systems, and we haven't addressed that at all. So Wendell Berry talked about eating is an agricultural act. And I can't remember who said it, but it was at the Salt Festival in Montana. One of the guys said that if every farmer and rancher had to become regenerative tomorrow, we would still have a problem in that our public is not informed enough about the kinds of food that we're eating. So that is probably an area that we need to get involved in, where public health people and agronomists and soil scientists need to be starting to talk. And I'm at the end of my career, and I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing. But I'm hoping to see that some of that interdisciplinary stuff can go on. And I think traditionally, when we have some of the more perhaps conservative thinking people in the soil and agronomy departments talking to some of the maybe more liberal people in the public health departments, I think there's going to have to be some back and forth over there as we try and move that forward. But essentially, you've got John Kemp, for instance, talking about it a lot. And I think he's kind of, he's just way smarter than most people I know already talking about plants. We know this intrinsically, that food can be our medicine. And I think John Kemp, if anyone does that, really touches on the idea that when we talk about soil health and environmental health, we touch on human health because we're eating the plants and the animals that come from that soil. And I think there's a lot of good evidence for it, But I think there's a lot of ignorance, and like you said, there's a lot of reductionist thinking, and we don't deal with that. Of course, the other person, Fred Provenza, Dr. Fred Provenza is the other guy. He wrote a book called Nourishment, excuse me, and we've got a podcast or two that we talked to Dr. Provenza on, and he would be a really good get for you guys. He's a wonderful thinker and a wonderful human being. So John Kempf and Fred Provenza, I think, have started that direction, and they've gone a lot further than I would ever dream of being able to go.
We're talking today with Dr. Buzz Kloot with the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. And Buzz, just a moment ago, you mentioned the name Wendell Berry, correct?
Yes.
One of my all-time favorite writers on nature and agriculture, and I could talk about him for the rest of the time, but I'm not going to. So, the one thing I did want to ask you about, you said something else that really got my attention. Students these days are crazy about soil health. Can you talk a little bit about the students these days and why they're excited about healthy soils?
I can speak about some of the graduate students I've met from the land-grant universities, and I can't speak specifically to all of the undergraduate body, but certainly in some of the aquatics and soil science classes I've taught at the University of South Carolina, soil science was a bit of a novelty, and we had a lot of excitement about kids coming in and talking about it. And whenever I talk about our work, we find that kids are very interested in that. I think, again, what they lack is a practical view of what the average farmer and rancher faces. So it's, let's go out and build a garden. Let's grow tomatoes and grow peppers. But I think certainly in a university like South Carolina, the idea of soils is a romantic idea. We tend to romanticize it, but there's not that solid practical foundation that we have. And of course, we're losing a lot of people, a lot of young people, because they haven't grown up on the farm. And we try and snag a few of them. I have an undergraduate student by the name of Rosie Bennett, and she has grown up on a small holding where she was 4-H. She showed guinea pigs. She showed goats, and she made $4,000 on one of her grand champion cages where she sold 2 ducks to a politician. So she said she made more money than a cattle owner. So those people are gold, and we need to hold on to those, and we need to try and get more kids involved in things like 4-H. I don't know if that I've kind of gone off on that question, but it's mixed. But we have a romanticized idea about the soil, but we don't really have people with practical roots in that.
And Buzz, sort of building off of that, what advice would you have just as far as some practical steps? You've been on some very large farms out in South Dakota, North Dakota, some large ones here in Virginia. At the same time, I know you do some experimentation in your home garden and at your home. What advice would you have in just overcoming any fear of experimenting?
Again, another really easy question. That's Eric. I would say that with anything, especially farmers and ranchers, is start small. We had a project called 5 acres in the back 40. So if you want to plant a cover crop and you don't want your neighbors to laugh at you, if you want to go no-till, or if you want to do a diverse crop rotation, often, we find that family pressure and pressure from neighbors is quite high. So try and do that at a small scale, somewhere where other people can't see it. And we've got the internet now. We've got YouTube, we've got Chat GPT. You know, that information is really easy to get right now. And possibly the problem is trying to filter it all out and what it is. But I think every person, every farmer and rancher, you are an expert on your own land, and you've got to try that and start small and go from there. If you're a rancher and you're season-long grazing, why don't you cut your pasture in two and just put the water, put the water tank on the fence line between the two pastures. So start small, start modest, and then watch what happens. That's my advice.
Well, unfortunately, our time is up in this episode, and Dr. Kloot, I want to thank you for being our guest, and I want to remind our listeners of a YouTube video that I just recently discovered. It was produced a few years back by the USDA NRCS, and the name of that video is Undercover Farmers. Once again, Undercover Farmers, and you can find it under YouTube, and I think you'll learn a lot about what our guest today is doing regarding soil health. Dr. Buzz Kloot with the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. Thank you, Buzz, for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate your listening to me.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.